Hi there, it's Natasha and thank you so much for joining me today. We have a really fun video on how to use up all of these backgrounds that we create. Now, I decided to kind of bring you along with the process here of creating some of my gel prints. But just for a little bit at the beginning, I'm going to show you some, but then we are going to get into turning these into some fabulous easy cards. No dies, no stamps required, and they are gorgeous. So first of all, I'm starting off with the materials that I use for gel printing. This plate here is a 5x7 one, and in the back I keep all these little die cuts and things, and I use these for making marks and textures. I let them dry and then I store them in the back of the clamshell just so that they are here every time I would like to use them. If they get paint or ink on them, I just let them dry and pop them back on. This one is well loved, and what I prefer to do is just take off one side there, and then the other side I like that so I can kind of move it around and things, so I leave the sheet on the other side of this. I use some stencils, I just have some cardstock there, but honestly you could probably get away with some copy paper as well. I just use whatever's kind of handy, and I also use a brayer. I have a few paints. I keep very few acrylic paints on hand, and some of them are very old and pretty much empty. But even that little bit of orange ink that I put on there at the beginning, I just got from kind of shaking the bottle down. It goes a long way when gel printing. And actually, when it comes to brayering on paints and things, less is kind of more. If you have too much, it ends up getting a bit squishy and a bit not quite as, just a little bit trickier. So less is probably more. You can mix as many colors as you want together. You can kind of use colors that you might not think work really well together and get some really interesting patterns. There are lots of amazing tutorials on YouTube with gel printing and things. There are lots of different things that you can use for it. There are lots of different tools. You can use things that you make. You can use die cuts and things to make impressions. You can use the ends of paint brushes. You can cut out your own little squiggles and patterns to make patterns with out of cardboard and things like that, out of old cereal boxes. I mean, the absolute opportunities are endless. They are so fun to play with, and honestly, what I prefer to do is when I get them out, I prefer to just make and create, not having something in mind, because I just really enjoy the process of the kind of freedom of it perhaps, and not having an end game in mind. So I don't go out thinking I only want to do blues, I'm going to create a bluesy greensy project today. I just kind of move on. I just keep going, and then you can kind of mix everything together. The less cleaning for this, the better for me. So I kind of move through the rainbow as I'm doing colors, and then once I have all of the kind of a first layer of colors down, this is often when I will come back and start using stencils and things to make patterns. Now obviously stencils are really easy, and they kind of sit down nicely. They kind of adhere down onto the paint. You can do a partial little print like this, or you can do the full thing, and I just press through using my fingers. Some people press through using the brayer. There are endless opportunities when it comes to gel printing. One of my absolute favorite techniques is image transfer, and I do have a video about that on my channel. If I remember, I will pop it in the description box below this video so that you can check out that one, where you can kind of take an image and then pop it onto your gel plate and then obviously print it onto any paper or anything like that. Just a whole lot of fun. These things are really fun, and they're not for everybody. And it's not something I use all the time, but I definitely love having one, and I definitely appreciate being able to kind of go through this process. And just, it is very, as I said, there's a lot of freedom with gel printing, because there are some gorgeous techniques, and you just never ever know what is kind of going to look good together, and often it's things that you wouldn't put together otherwise. So kind of layering pattern upon pattern upon pattern, it's just really fun. Now these of course have been acrylic paints, but there are so many other things that you can use on a gel plate as well, and inks are going to work perfectly fine too. So I'm going to show you a little bit of using inks, but honestly this was just a little portion of my session. It was nice to kind of share a little bit with you. I'm never sure how much you kind of want to see, but I am popping on some Distress Oxide inks. I find that these work pretty good on my gel plate. I must admit, I think I have some Versamark on the right hand side of my plate there. You can see that the ink is not loving adhering to that, and I probably need to give it a little wash with some warm soapy water, but in my mind it just kind of creates really gorgeous texture, so I decided to leave it there. I was happy with the results that it was giving me, and it was just a whole lot of fun, and yeah, I think it probably just is an opportunity for texture. So Distress Oxide inks work really, really well. I think I haven't really tried normal Distress inks, but yeah, I mean, give it a go. Anything that you've got in your stash, you can use stamps like I am here to add colour on top of the red. So I am just stamping down with a normal stamp in some of the mustard seed colour, which is the yellow colour. And again, that's kind of like a little bit like stamp kissing, I guess. And you can get a really nice texture that way. And I don't know about you, but when I kind of go through these processes, or even when I am doing normal card making, I end up with a whole lot of backgrounds or things that I will give a go kind of a couple of times, and I only end up using one on a card, or I have all these kind of leftover bits and pieces that I end up popping aside in a little box or a little bag. And I have to make the conscious effort to kind of use these because they are very easy to kind of have an idea in my head and just want to go ahead and create that, rather than going through the stash that I already have and images and backgrounds and things that I already have. And so I try to be mindful, because I have a small space, that I don't have the space to store everything. So once I had like a pile of these, some of them have been cut into, some of them have been used for other projects. This was about maybe 2 or 3 weeks later. I'm coming back to this, and as I said, I used some of them for a project and I had them still sitting there, and so this was where I was like, okay, I need to be using these up. So today is the day, and what better day than that? So there are, as I said, a range of colours: purples, oranges, greens, blues. For this project, I'm keeping it super, super simple. I have some card bases. I have a few pieces of Kraft cardstock, and in fact some of these I think are actually going to be recycled. I have images on the back of them. For whatever reason I didn't end up using that, but just remember that you can just use the other side. Luckily paper has 2 sides and I'm able to reuse them. I have some foam squares for a little bit of dimension, and I also have a black fine tip marker. I'm going to use a couple of different pairs of scissors. The ones on the left are cutter bees, and the ones on the right are the 9.5 inch Tim Holtz scissors. So one for really fine detail and one for lots of big cutting. I'm also going to have my little ink daubers out here, and we are going to be freehanding it today. Now don't let this scare you. If you like, you can draw on the back here. Now I want this little bit down the bottom. I don't want that pattern up the top. So to make sure that I am going to kind of draw in the right space, I prefer to cut out that bottom bit, and that kind of narrows it down a bit for me. I don't mind doing this because I don't feel like I'm cutting into anything that I otherwise wouldn't. And I am going to start off by making this gorgeous big apple. Now that truly took me like 3 seconds, and even when I'm cutting this out, I feel like it's kind of a rough guide for the back. It doesn't have to be perfect. You can see I don't stick exactly to the lines, but the shape is extremely basic, and I turn it around, and honestly, because of that texture, because of the all that kind of those different colors, the oranges and the reds, it makes it look actually kind of interesting and a little bit whimsical. So I have a brown piece here. I am going to cut just a tiny little stalk for the top of my apple, and then I decided that I would do this lot on the Kraft card bases there, or the card front, sorry. And then I decided it needed a little bit more color, so I'm finding a little piece for a leaf. I want something that's a little bit interesting rather than kind of a flat green like a couple of those were. But I kind of wanted something with a little bit more texture or interest, and when I was going through these, there's this piece here which probably doesn't look that good. I think it was my mopping up piece, but this little bit of green in the middle was calling to me, and I may as well use it. The other is kind of a little bit more blue, so even though as a whole that thing didn't look very good, when I cut out these little bits out of it, I'm able to make good use of it. And I keep all of those bigger pieces because you just never know when you're going to need that kind of color or texture. So this is just extremely simple, and I know that it can be kind of scary to freehand cut things, But honestly, if you give it a go, and nobody will notice the imperfections or that it's not perfect. I did not take long to do these at all. It's very freeing, and that kind of goes along with the process of the freedom of gel printing for me. I am using a little bit of red ink. Usually I'm able to pick up my ink daubers and they have enough ink left on them just as is, like the green one here. But actually for the red one, I needed to just grab a little bit more ink from the ink pad, and that just kind of gets rid of those white edges, but you definitely don't have to do that at all. I wanted to pop this up on some foam squares just to give it a little bit of dimension. These are going to be very, very clean and simple cards, but I think that all of the texture and the kind of fun, whimsical design just really makes them. So that piece of Kraft cardstock is 3 3/4 by 5 inches, so that is going to mean that if I pop them down on a white card base, it is going to create a gorgeous little border, and I thought that that worked really well. I didn't have these pieces cut down especially for this project. This was just what was sitting in my little scraps box, my kind of stash, and obviously I had used a couple of these on the back, and I'm going to kind of recycle them or upcycle them and keep using them. So once I put it down onto this card base, and the card base is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches, and I won't dwell too long on the fact that I just put the card front on backwards, so the card opened backwards, but luckily it was 1 second after I'd popped it down, and I was able to just whip it off and turn it the right way around. Now we're going to move on to our next one. And I did think when I was creating this that I wanted to make a little set of cards. So I saw this piece here with the little blue texture, and even though you wouldn't think blue would kind of work for this, I'm going to freehand drawing this little pear. This is not perfect, it's a bit wonky, it's a bit off to the left, but I really like that, remembering that these are very whimsical. And I'm going to create this little gift set, and actually this was a really, really long video, and I'm going to kind of create one gift set here to begin with, and then I'm going to show you another style of cards in part 2. So this is going to have a part 2. I've already edited it. It's much shorter. It's only about 7 or 8 minutes long, but honestly this video just started to get way too long, and I prefer to do shorter videos. I don't particularly like 2-part videos, but in this case I guess this is just how it happened. So here is my little pear anyway, so simple to put together, and I didn't even draw on the back of that one. As I said, it's a little bit wonky, it's a little bit off, but nobody is going to notice when it's kind of the style of the cards. So I put a little bit of glue on the back of this one, pop it down onto my card base, and that is the second one done in the set. Now if you didn't have to do the gel printing first, then this process goes really, really quick. I kind of sat down one night after the kids had gone to bed, and I was just, as I said, I was in the kind of mindset where I knew I wanted to use this pile, and I just really like this. This kind of reminds me of the style. There is a book called The Very Hungry Caterpillar, and the fruit and things that the caterpillar eats through kind of reminds me of this kind of style. It looks like it's you know, lots of patterns and printed and put together, little cutouts put together and things. It looks really similar to this, so that's what I was doing. When I was reading the kids their books tonight, that was one of the books I read, and I kind of looked at it and the style of fruit that is in there, and that's where I came to thinking that I would do these kind of fruit inspired ones. Now this one is meant to be some cherries, hopefully that you can tell that. I do not have any great skills when it comes to this. These shapes are all very, very basic, and that is what I need. I need basic, but I think when you're looking at them you can hopefully tell exactly what they're meant to be and just appreciate the kind of style that they are. They're not meant to be perfect, they're not meant to be the absolute perfect shapes. For these cherries I did add a little bit of a white gel pen just to kind of give them that little bit of extra shine. Again, pop it down onto a white card base, and then all 3 of these are finished and good to go. I decided not to put a sentiment on. I think lots of people have been enjoying those cards. When my family comes to pick them out of my stash, they've been picking those cards quite a lot, so I decided to go with that look. But these are the 3 that I've made today. Make sure you check out the next video, which will be coming up soon. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you next time. Bye!